Wednesday, 29th April 2020. Now children, this is the third lesson on Street Child. Okay, so we are going to carry on reading Street Child, chapter 1. Learning intention: to learn how to make notes to show what has been deduced from a text. Success criteria: I can understand homophones. I can respond imaginatively to a text. I can visualize and annotate how a character is feeling in a story. Now, before we start, let's do a little bit of spag. Now, today we are going to learn something about homophones. Homophones are words that sound the same but have different meanings. For example, I and I. Okay, so the letter I stands for myself, and then you have the eye, which is a part of your face. Okay, so both are homophones. They sound the same but they have different meanings. Now your task is you're going to write out the sentences underneath choosing the correct word. Use a dictionary if you're unsure. Okay, so I'm going to pause the slide slightly. Get your pen and paper and write down these sentences using the correct homophones. After you've written all your answers, I will be discussing all the answers. Okay, so question number 1, I'm going to church on Sunday something. Okay, think about both the spellings. Which spelling are you going to write? Question number 2, Dad's camper van something, the MOT, shrieked Paul. Okay, now look at both the spellings of past. Which one are you going to use? Jack something his football team to victory. Okay, now which spelling are you going to use for led? The first one or the second one? The family were something, the loss of their relative. Okay, so which morning are you going to use? Morning or morning? Luke something his driving test yesterday. Mom always has a cup of coffee first thing in the morning. Morning or morning? Okay. The pipe was made of which lead are you going to use? The first one or the second one? Okay, pause the slide. Write down your answers before I discuss the right answers. Okay, now the first answer is morning. M-O-R-N-I-N-G, Sunday morning. Question number 2, past, P-A-S-S-E-D. Dad's camper passed the M-O-T, P-A-S-S-E-D. Jack led, L-E-D, led his football team to victory. The family was mourning, M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G. And Luke passed, P-A-S-S-E-D, passed. And then Mom always has a cup of coffee first thing in the morning, M-O-R-N-I-N-G, morning. And the pipe was made of lead, L-E-A-D, lead. Okay, the material lead. Okay, now children, we are going to read the first chapter of the story, The Street Child. Okay, now I'm going to read the first paragraph. You can pause the slide and read the remaining part of the chapter very silently in your minds. The Shilling Pie. Jim Jarvis hopped about on the edge of the road. His feet blue with cold. Passing carriages flung muddy snow up onto his face and his eyes, and the swaying horses slithered and skidded as they were whipped on by their drivers. At last Jim saw his chance and made a dash for it through the traffic. The little shops in the dark street all glowed yellow with their hanging lamps, and Jim dodged from one light to the next until he came to the shop he was looking for. It was the meat pudding shop. Hungry boys and skinny dogs hovered round the doorway, watching for scraps. Jim pushed past them, his coins as hot as a piece of coal in his fist. He could hear his stomach gurgling as the rich smell of hot gravy met him. Now, children, read the remaining chapter silently in your heads. I'm going to pause the slide. Even you can pause your video for some time by the time you're reading. Okay, now you're going to answer these guided reading questions on your sheet of paper. Okay, now I'll give you the answers in the next slide, but before that, just write your answers on your sheet of paper. Let me read the questions for you. What does the way Jim speaks suggest about his character? Now this is from the preface. Now we had done the preface yesterday, so think about his character. Find an example of a simile in the preface, or you can even find a simile from the first chapter. In fact, the paragraph that I read just now, that had a simile. So think about it. Why did Mrs. Hodder tell Jim to go away when he first arrived at the shop? Why did Mrs. Hodder bite the coin that Jim gave to her? What is different about the point of view that the preface and chapter 1 are written in? On page 19, what do you learn about Jim's house that could be unusual in a modern house? Find 3 clues from chapter 1 that suggest that this story is not set in the modern day. Okay, so I'm going to pause the slide slightly for you to write the answers. You can pause your video, write your answers before you go on the answers slide. Okay, now let's go on the answers. What does the way Jim speaks suggest about his character? It says that he's uneducated and he's poor as well. Find an example of a simile in the preface. I shut out the sound of the fire, sniffing like a dog at a rat hole. Question number 3. Why did Mrs. Hodder tell Jim to go away when he first arrived at the shop? She thought he was begging for scraps like other boys. Why did Mrs. Hodder bite the coin that Jim gave to her? To check that it was real. Question number 5. What is different about the point of view that the preface and chapter 1 are written in? The preface is written in first person as if Jim himself is writing the story, whereas chapter 1 is written as third person as if the author has written the story. Question number 6. On page 19, what do we learn about Jim's house that would be unusual in a modern house? Jim's family only have a room. The house is full of other families too. Find 3 clues from chapter 1 that suggest that this story is not set in the modern day. Now this depends on you which 3 clues that you can find from chapter 1 that shows that this is not a modern day story. Think about your answers. Email me the answers so that I can give you feedback. Now, after reading chapter 1, what have you learned about the family so far? Let's reread the last section. But the pie had grown cold before the children finished it. They pulled their rag pile close to the hearth and curled up together, Jim between Emily and Lizzie. In all the rooms of the house they could hear people muttering and yawning and scratching. Outside in the street dogs were howling and carriage wheels trundled on the slushy roads. Jim lay awake. He could hear how his mother's breath rattled in her throat, and he knew by the way she tossed and turned that she wasn't asleep. He could tell by the way his sisters lay taut and still each side of him that they were awake too, listening through the night to its noises, longing for day to come. Okay, now, after reading this part, what do you think Jim is thinking? Okay, he's awake in his, where he's sleeping. What do you think Jim might be thinking in his head? And what can you tell about the family so far? Okay, just think about it. Okay, so now as I said, close your eyes and try to visualize the scene as you read it. Think about the things that Jim could hear and how you think he might have been feeling. Okay, so his father is no more. There's no money in the house. There's extreme poverty. There's like they don't have any money. Mom is not feeling well. How do you think Jim might be feeling at this point of time? How would a child feel when their mom is bedridden and they don't even have a dad? So you can think about how Jim might be feeling in his head. Now task. Your task now is you're going to draw a picture of a scene from this chapter. So you've read the entire chapter. You are going to draw a picture of the scene. You might choose the last scene of the family at night where everybody is trying to sleep but they can't sleep. Or perhaps draw Jim running through the streets with his penny pie. When you have drawn your picture, you can annotate it to show what is happening and how Jim is feeling. Use the text to support your responses and ideas. Okay, good luck with the task. Email me all your answers and I will be giving you feedback based on your responses and ideas. Bye bye.